they've got about 100 days of a honeymoon period that might very well last 50 to 60 days, where people are still going to be just excited that they have Kamala Harris. They're not going to dig into her record. They're not going to be bothered by her record because they're going to be so excited for probably the next 50 days. Well, we've only got about 100 until a general election and even fewer to early voting.
Yeah.
So don't get too comfortable on the Trump side. And I'm sure we're going to talk about this later, but the attacks on her personally, on whatever her past personally may have been, or calling her a childless lady, none of those are going to work, and they're going to make women second guess their support for what they may have felt for Donald Trump. Bad move.
Ooh, there are a lot of strong points in that for Republicans. I mean, depending on how much you love Donald Trump and do or don't like his VP pick, some of that was for J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's for
Don't
everyone.
call women dumb. It just doesn't work. On Republican women or liberal women, it just doesn't work. There are much better ways to attack Kamala.
Even Fox News contributors like Tomi Lahren are pulling their hair out over J.D. Vance continuing to step in the kitty litter with his childless cat lady comments. We're finding out just how stubborn and insular the Trump-Vance ticket really is on this watch list.
You have Hollywood celebrities saying, oh, well, J.D. Vance, what if your daughter suffered fertility problems? Well, first of all, that's disgusting because my daughter is 2 years old. And second of all, if she had fertility problems, as I said in that speech, I would try everything I could to try to help her because I believe families and babies are a good thing. That's the whole point, is if you believe families and babies are a good thing, you should be trying to promote life. You should try to promote the fact that we want to have a good family policy in this country. That is what's so profoundly wrong about where the Democrats have gone. And I think we have to fight back against this, Megan. I think a lot of people, the media has been attacking me and this is how it goes. We cannot give up an inch on this. Obviously, it was a sarcastic comment. I've got nothing against cats. I've got nothing against dogs. I've got one dog at home and I love him, Megan. But look, this is not, people are focusing so much on the sarcasm and not on the substance of what I actually said. And the substance of what I said, Megan, I'm sorry, it's true.
J.D. Vance grabbed his shovel and went on a media tour so that he could dig deeper into the hole that he created 3 years ago by talking about the uselessness of childless cat ladies. It would only be worse if he said they're so useless that not only should their rights be limited, but their representation should decrease while they pay more in taxes.
I'll go back to something I said earlier about we need to reward the things that we think are good and punish the things that we think are bad. So you talk about tax policy. Let's tax the things that are bad and not tax the things that are good. If you're making $100,000, $400,000 a year, and you've got 3 kids, you should pay a different, lower tax rate than if you're making the same amount of money and you don't have any kids. It's that simple.
I totally agree.
Yeah, it's that bad. Also, I'm no accountant, but I've heard of this little thing called deductions for dependents, which increase based on the number of children you have. But anyway, Vance's explanation tour made a stop in Trey Gowdy's show, where the former congressman wouldn't even let him on the show until he pointed out that, surprisingly, he's met a couple of people without children that aren't possessed by Satan.
They're Catholic nuns, childless, dedicated to God, love this country, living lives of service to others. And it's not just Catholic nuns. Some of the finest people I know don't have children. Teachers and guidance counselors and lawyers and doctors, and they love other people's children enough to teach and guide and protect and minister to them. Some people choose not to have children. Others desperately want them, but they can't. In a moment, we'll speak with Senator J.D. Vance. We have never met before, but we have many friends in common who tell me that he is smart and he is talented and he is more than capable. None is perfect, no, not one. That's what the good book says. And the American people are forgiving if we ask.
Isn't it telling that before the party's vice presidential nominee even fixes his face to lie on TV, the network that sacrificed hundreds of millions of dollars in service to Trump's lies, they felt the need to distance themselves from the disdain that he's got for voters. But he still had to beg them to give JD another chance, knowing that Vance has been tossing the middle finger around to people that have an issue with his belief system.
Dr. Connie Rice does not have children, neither does my friend, your colleague, Tim Scott. George Washington did not have biological children, and neither did James Madison. So I think you will agree with me that direct offspring are not necessary to be fully invested in the future of this country.
Of course not, Trey. I do think that being a parent actually has a profound effect on somebody's perspective, and we should honor and respect that. But there are a whole host of people who don't have children for a whole host of reasons, and they certainly are great people who can participate fully in the life of this country. And that's not what I said, Trey. If you look at what the left has done, they have radically taken this out of context and, in fact, aggressively lied about what I've said. What I was basically saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it? I just wanted to ask that question and propose that maybe if we want a healthy ruling class in this country, we should invest more, we should vote more, we should support more people who actually have kids, because those are the people who ultimately have a more direct stake in the future of this country. What I do think is true, Trey, and this goes to the heart of what I was talking about 3 years ago in those comments, but it's going to be something I continue to talk about, is that the left has increasingly become explicitly anti-child and anti-family. This is not a criticism and was never a criticism, Trey, of everybody without children. That is a lie of the left.
He said it was never a criticism of everybody without children. That's a lie of the left.
When you go to the polls in this country as a parent, you should have more power. You should have more of an ability to speak your voice in our democratic republic than people who don't have kids. Let's face the consequences and the reality. If you don't have as much of an investment in the future of this country, maybe you shouldn't get nearly the same voice. Now, people will say, and I'm sure the Atlantic and the Washington Post and all the usual suspects will criticize me about this in the coming days. Well, doesn't this mean that non-parents don't have as much of a voice as parents? Doesn't this mean that parents get a bigger say in how our democracy functions? Yes, absolutely.
You see, I never criticize people without children. I just push for a radical policy change where people without children have a lesser say in how their country operates. Now, let me put this shovel down. It's getting kind of dark down here in this hole that I'm digging. You know, he actually must have realized that this appearance wasn't convincing anyone. So he pulled the MAGA emergency cord to be used in case of being exposed. He blatantly lied.
There's one more thing I want to say on this, Trey. I think a lot of parents and a lot of non-parents look at our public policy over the last 4 years and ask, how did we get to this place? How did we get to a place where Kamala Harris is calling for an end to the child tax credit? How did we get to a place where we were masking toddlers years into the pandemic? I think it's because we radically underrepresent the perspective of parents.
Since he doesn't expect his supporters to actually look into what he claims, Vance knew that he could scamper away acting like his party has ever advocated for lower and middle-class families to have increased benefits for their children, or their health care, or jobs and housing. But according to MAGA, those are just articles from the untrustworthy media. Let's see how Republicans responded to Joe Biden detailing the good things about the child tax credit that J.D. Vance said VP Harris and the administration are against.
The child tax credit I passed during the pandemic cut taxes for millions of working families and cut child poverty in half. Restore that child tax credit. No child should go hungry in this country.
Weird how VP Harris and Democrats applauded the child tax credit, while Moses Mike Johnson and fellow VP hopeful Marco Rubio sat in silence with the rest of their party as if they don't support it. So this is the running mate that Trump is stuck with. But maybe he's actually enjoying the hateful and blatantly dishonest campaign that he's running, because it's not much different than the way that Trump has been acting on the trail. MAGA just refuses to acknowledge anything that doesn't confirm their principles of exclusion and insular thought. But their inner circle might be getting smaller than they realize.
He went ahead and said, no, there's people that try to have kids or don't want to have kids and are great Americans. So he wanted to explain himself. The question is, when you're explaining, you're usually losing. And that's all they want, is him to sit there the whole time and explain the comments. He does a lot of interviews, a lot of podcasts, did a lot of publicity for Hillbilly Elegy, for the movie and for the book. So they're going to be pulling up all of this.
And so that's why in the last 72 hours, we've heard all the, there have been a number of mainstream media stories where it's like, did Donald Trump pick the right guy to be his vice president? And obviously, speaking to Trey, he did further explanation of the childless cat lady's comment, and he doubled down on what his intent was. But nonetheless, we had Donald Trump on the show last week, and we asked him about, are you still 100% behind J.D. Vance? And he said, absolutely. And I saw something from the campaign responding to, there's some suggestion that Donald Trump could fire him in the next 10 days.
J.D. Vance is the vice presidential nominee for President Trump. Now, if you had a time machine, if you go back 2 weeks, would he have picked J.D. Vance again? I doubt it. I think he probably would have picked somebody like Glenn Youngkin from Virginia. Again, J.D. is super smart. He also has a long history of public commentary.